Hello and welcome to Cupcake Addiction's Do-It-Yourself Cupcake Stencil tutorial. This is a fabulous technique for you to know across all cupcake decorating and cake decorating. I'm going to be showing you how to make your own stencil which you can suit to pretty much any theme you can think of. Today's tutorial, I'm making these in the 5 factions from the movie Divergent due to an overwhelming amount of requests from you guys asking me to do something divergent. The things that you need for today's tutorial, I've got my 5 cupcakes. I've gone for dark chocolate raspberry cupcakes today, and as you can see, I've just baked those. I've only filled the cupcake cases halfway full, so they've actually baked well within the confines of those cupcake cases and they're not protruding over the top. I've got some of our do-it-yourself edible sanding sugar. I will link to that tutorial in the description box below, and I've coloured that red, grey, black, blue and yellow. You can also use sprinkles, but it's really cheap and really simple to colour your own. I've got a knife and a pair of scissors, some of our buttercream frosting in white, which I'll also link to in the description box below. I'm using a little scalpel knife or a little craft hobby knife, so be really careful with these. They are incredibly sharp, but you do want something really sharp, and you should pay more than about $4 or $5 for a set of those in a craft store. Whenever you use one of those, you want to make sure that you're using it in conjunction with some sort of a cutting or craft mat so you don't destroy your benches. And I've also got our stencil template, which I will link to in the description box below. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut all of the black sections out of these little stencils that I've made for you guys. When you're making your own stencil, you want to print out the images you're going to use and then take the time to grab a marker or something along those lines and work out which sections you're going to cut out, because you need to make sure that you're only cutting out sections from within the circle and you're not actually cutting out big chunks that are then not going to make sense when you fill them in with colour. So I've done this one for you, and we're just going to go around that with our little scalpel or Stanley knife or very, very sharp knife, and just cut out the little sections. So as you cut around, you can just pop out that little piece, and don't worry if they're not perfect, but you want to make sure that your pieces are bigger rather than smaller, because you need to make sure that you can fill them with sprinkles and they're still going to make sense. I will also mention with these stencils, I wouldn't recommend printing them on paper. I've printed mine out on about a 210 GSM, sort of like a bit of a heavier duty paper or a really light duty cardboard. Paper is going to be just a touch thin for what we're doing with these, and you want them to have a little bit more strength so that they don't do just one cupcake. All right, so once you've cut around all of your little pieces for your template, you then want to take your scissors and you're just going to cut around the coloured circle. So I've put them in the correct coloured circles so that you guys will know which one relates to which house, depending on who you're making these for and if you've seen the movie. And I've left a little tab at the top, and that's so that you can actually group your stencils to put them on and off your cupcakes. Perfect. So you want to repeat that with each of your stencils so that you've got all 5 of those cut out and ready to go. And you can do this well in advance to save time on the day. All right, so to frost up your cupcakes, and you want to do this individually as you're ready to go. You've got all of your stencils there. So I frost these individually because that buttercream will start to crust, and you don't want it to start to crust before you've got a chance to put your stencils on there, or your sanding sugar won't stick. So because I've left the tide out on those cupcakes, I'm actually just filling the top section and then smoothing it off. So what I'm ending up with is a really nice, easy flat top. If you find that your cupcakes are overfilled, or if you want a bit more height to them, you can also use our flat top frosting style, and that's going to give you the same effect but with a little bit more height. It's best at this point, if you've got like a plate or some sort of a shallow tray, to tip your sprinkles out into that shallow tray. So we'll start off with Candor, which is our scales. Take your stencil now and position it in the center of your cupcake. And this works particularly well for these because they've got the colored ring around the outside. If you didn't want that colored ring, you would simply make your stencil larger so that you didn't see any of the frosting around the outside edges. So I'm actually pushing that down into the frosting so that it gets a nice stick going to that buttercream frosting. Now that's given it a relatively good coat, but you just want to make sure that it's completely coated. So you might need to get in there and just fill in some of those little blank bits. Beautiful. Now also don't forget that behind your little lift tab, it's still going to be white. So just pop that little lift tab forward and make sure that you're coating that section there as well, or it's going to look a little bit odd. And then you just want to sort of run your fingers over your stencil and make sure that all of your sanding sugar is within the confines of the stencil and that it's pushed down nicely, because when you peel that off, a little bit of it's going to want to come off. So you want to make sure that it's really nice and pushed in, particularly on those thinner lines. Perfect. Now you want to carefully peel away your stencil. Give it a little tap to make sure you don't have any excess pieces, because you don't want any of that black sugar landing on the white sections underneath that are not supposed to have black on them. It takes away from the effect. And really carefully just peel up your stencil. And there you've got your first little divergent faction. So you just want to repeat that process for each of the cupcakes. Now, things that you want to consider here is don't push that stencil too hard into your frosting, or when you try to take it out, it's actually going to take some of the frosting with it. Make sure that in between cupcakes, if you're doing several of each of these, that you actually take the time to just wipe off the back of your little cardboard stencil template, just so that you don't put any sanding sugar onto the white surface of your nice fresh cupcake. Moving on now to Erudite the Intelligent. Just pushing down gently. How easy, clean, and beautiful is that? So we're coming into our last one now, and just so that you can see that technique for a final time. Really, really nice, smooth and flat surface. However you're going to frost your cupcake, you do want to make sure it's nice and smooth and flat on top. Pushing down your stencil, not too tough into the frosting. You do want it to stick, but you don't want to jam it down into the frosting so that it pulls pieces off. And down it goes. Now just sprinkle more sanding sugar on top till you're happy that you've covered up all of those bits of white that are visible. Do make sure with these two that you give them a little tap and just get rid of any excess, because you don't want it to be falling off or moving around and messing up your cupcake when you're transporting these. Lift up the back, bit of sanding sugar so that your circle goes all the way around, and then gently lifting off your template. Beautiful. So there you've got your 5 factions from the movie Divergent, all done really, really simply in cupcakes. But more than that, what you've got is a skill that you can now translate into numbers for birthdays, letters or initials, monograms, and you've got pretty much any picture you like on top of a cake or cupcake. I hope you guys have found this tutorial useful, and I look forward to seeing all of the cool creations that you guys come up with for your do-it-yourself stencils. Thanks very much for tuning in to My Cupcake Addiction.